Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945 to Dorothy and William Rader, one of four sons. Both parents worked long hours and paid little attention to their children at home. Rader later described feeling ignored by his mother in particular and resenting her for it. From a young age, Rader harbored sadistic fantasies about torturing trapped and helpless women. He also exhibited zoo sadism by torturing, killing, and hanging small animals. Rader acted out fetishes of voyeurism, autoerotic asphyxiation, and cross-dressing. He often spied on female neighbors while dressed in women's clothing, including women's underwear that he had stolen, and masturbated with ropes or other bindings around his arms and neck. Years later, during his cooling off periods between murders, Rader would take pictures of himself wearing women's clothes and female masks while bound. He later admitted that he was pretending to be his victims as part of a sexual fantasy. However, Rader kept his sexual proclivities well hidden, and he was widely regarded in his community as normal, polite, and well-mannered. From 1966 to 1970, he served in the US Air Force. He was stationed in Okinawa for 6 months and in 1968 was then stationed at the Tachikawa Air Base near Tokyo. Rader has stated that in later years he was also stationed in Korea, Greece and Turkey. It was in those years that he started having relations with local prostitutes and stalking others in the community. In a journal, he wrote how he was able to successfully break into a base library and steal a book without getting caught. Rader attended Kansas University after high school, but received mediocre grades and dropped out after 1 year. Rader married Paula Dietz on May 22, 1971, and they had two children, Kerry and Brian. He attended Butler County Community College in El Dorado, earning an associate degree in electronics in 1973. He then enrolled at Wichita State University and graduated in 1979 with a Bachelor of Science degree, majoring in Administration of Justice. Rader initially worked as an assembler for the coal mill company. He worked at the Wichita-based office of ADT Security Services from 1974 to 1988, where he installed security alarms as part of his job, in many cases for homeowners concerned about the BTK killings. Rader was a census field operations supervisor for the Wichita area in 1989, before the 1990 federal census. In May 1991, Rader became a dog catcher and a compliance officer in Park City. In this position, neighbors recalled him as being sometimes overzealous and extremely strict, as well as taking special pleasure in bullying and harassing single women. One neighbor complained that Rader killed her dog for no reason. Rader was a member of Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita and had been elected president of the church council. On January 15, 1974, Dennis Rader broke into the home of the Otero family between 7 and 7:30 a.m. Rader gathered a well-figured-out plan and got together his hit kit, which consisted of guns, cords, knives, and multiple tools for breaking and entering. He cut the phone lines and broke into the house. He was expecting to see the wife, 35-year-old Julie Otero, and her two kids, 11-year-old Josephine and 9-year-old Joseph Jr. But to his surprise, the husband, 38-year-old Joseph Otero, was also home. Quickly, he took out a gun, then told the family that he was a wanted criminal. He told them that he needed food, money, and a car. He forced the family into the bedroom where he tied their hands and feet together. He strangled Mrs. Otero until she passed out, assuming she was dead. He then moved to Mr. Otero and put a plastic bag over his head and tied it with a cord. He also did the same with Joseph Jr. He then took the daughter Josephine to the basement and hung her by a pipe. In his confession, Rader stated that once he hung the girl, he fulfilled his sexual fantasies, leaving semen by the crime scene. Rader tidied up the house and took some souvenirs like Mr. Otero's watch and radio, then went home. Later that day, 15-year-old Charlie Otero was coming back home from school when he heard his brothers Danny and sister Carmen yelling for him to come to the bedroom. They thought their parents were playing a practical joke on them, but soon they found out the horrendous truth that their family had been brutally murdered. Just a few months after Otero's murder, Catherine Bright was murdered on April 4, 1974. Rader had seen her before entering her home and considered her as one of his projects. That day, he broke into her home from the porch door and hid in the bedroom. Around 2 p.m., she arrived home but with her brother Kevin, which Rader was not expecting. Rader came rushing out of the room with the gun pointing straight at them. He told them the same story that he was a wanted criminal and needed a car, food, and money because he was on his way to New York. He forced the two into the bedroom and ordered Kevin to tie his sister's hands and feet. He then took Kevin into the other room and tried to tie him up as well, but was not successful. Kevin got into a fight with Rader, getting very close to taking the gun from him. But Rader was able to get a good hold on the gun and shot Kevin in the head twice. After that, he went back to Catherine to finish his project. Catherine also put up a big fight against Rader as he tried to strangle her. He realized that strangling her was not going to work, so he started stabbing her in the abdomen multiple times. While that was happening, Kevin Bright was able to escape. He ran a few blocks to his car and drove off in search of help. Sadly, even after multiple emergency surgeries and blood transfusions, Catherine Bright died at the age of 21. Her brother Kevin was in critical condition but did survive. After one young man allegedly confessed to killing Uteros with two friends, an editor of the Wichita Eagle received a strange phone call which directed him to the mechanical engineering book at the Wichita Public Library. Police found the book and a letter wedged inside, which read in parts, "Those three dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity. The code word for me now will be bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK. See you he at it again. They will be on the next victim." Letter also included then unknown details of the Otero killing. Letter was filled with what authorities came to recognize as the killer's peculiar misspellings and grammatical errors. In 1977, Rader decided to come out again as BTK after 3 years of silence. He decided it was time to kill again and he spotted his soon-to-be victim in a neighborhood that he was strolling through. That day, he was supposed to go after a woman named Cheryl whom he had met at a bar, but she was not home. He decided to go down Hydraulic Street and came in contact with a 5-year-old boy named Steve Relford. Rader pulled out a picture of his own wife and son and asked if he knew where they were. The boy said no and went home. Later, Rader knocked on the door and Steve answered the door. He posed as a detective, which let him get inside the house with no problem. Including Steve, there were 3 children in the house. Rader turned off the TV and turned down the blinds. The mother, Shirley Vaughn, came out of one of the rooms, startled. At gunpoint, he ordered the children to go into the bathroom and lock them inside. He told Shirley what he planned on having his way with her. Somehow, he was able to lead her to believe that it wasn't rape and calmed her down by giving her a glass of water and smoked a cigarette with her. While the children were screaming in the bathroom, Rader tied their mother up and strangled her to death by putting a cord around her neck. He left semen on her panties, which were found next to her body. In later years, during his confession, Rader stated that the telephone rang, causing him to leave early, which left the children in the bathroom still screaming for their mother. On March 17, 1977, Shirley Vaughn was murdered at the age of 24, leaving behind 3 kids and a husband. By December 1977, Rader became obsessed with stalking 25-year-old Nancy Fox. On December 8, he cut the phone line and then broke into her modest duplex from the back door. He waited in her home for her to get back from her job at a jewelry store. Since she lived alone, he had no trouble surprising her in the kitchen at gunpoint. He told her that he had a sexual issue and that in order to get rid of that issue, he had to tie her up and rape her. After being allowed to partly disrobe herself in the bathroom, he ordered her into the bedroom. He tied her up and undressed himself. He then started to strangle her. As he strangled her, he confessed to her who he really was and what he had done in the past. Her body was found later with semen on the nightgown that was next to her. The following day, on his way to work for the ADT alarm company, He called the local police department and said, "Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. Nancy Fox, that is correct," and then left the receiver dangling. The police rushed to the house at 843 South Pershing and found Nancy's body strangled to death. The police tried to replay the recording of his voice many times but never found a match. Early 1978, Rader sent a sarcastic poem called Shirley Locks to the Wichita Eagle newspaper. After the poem was a serious letter, BTK was again taking responsibility for the past 7 homicides. It was written the same way as the letter that was found in 1974, including a factor X, which was apparently the reason for him to commit these horrible crimes. The next letter that was found was mocking the murder of Nancy Fox, entitled "Oh, Death to Nancy," which was mimicking the song "Oh Death." Apparently angered by the lack of response to his last attempt, the killer sent a more direct message to Wichita-based a.k.a. TV. "How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" He writes before reeling off a list of suggested names: the BTK Strangler, the Wichita Hangman, and the Asphyxiator. On February 10, 1978, Wichita Police Chief called a news conference to reveal for the first time the presence of the BTK Strangler in the area. "We have no reason but to believe the individual has capability to kill again," he warned. On April 28, 1979, Rader lied in wait for Anna Williams, but gave up and left when 63-year-old woman took too long to return home. Less than 2 months later, Williams learns of her brush with death when she received several of her personal items by mail, along with the poem titled "Oh Anna, Why Didn't You Appear?" His next victim was 53-year-old Maureen Hedge. She was a widow and described as a kind and gentle woman. Hedge and Rader lived on the same block for over 30 years in Park City. On April 27, 1985, Rader was in the middle of Boy Scout meeting when he stated that he had a headache and needed to leave to get medicine. He left and walked to his car that was near a bowling alley. He went inside and bought a beer. He swished the beer in his mouth, then spit it out, purposely spilling some on his clothing, giving onlookers the illusion that he had been drinking. He called a cab, pretending to be drunk, and told the driver to take him to the Park City. Once he got to Hedges' home, he saw her car and assumed she was home. He cut the phone line as usual and quietly opened the back door to sneak in. He realized no one was home and waited in her bedroom until he saw her car pull into the driveway. Maureen Hedge and another man walked into the house. Rader waited in the bedroom closet until 1 a.m. so that the man had gone and Maureen had gone to sleep. Rader came out of hiding, turned on the bedroom light, and jumped on top of Maureen, choking her to death. Once she had died, he dragged her body outside into the trunk of a car. He drove her to the church that he went to regularly, and because he was trusted member, he had keys to the building. He put black plastic over the windows so no one could look inside. Then he dragged her body to the basement of the church. He photographed the body in multiple different poses before putting her body back in the trunk of the car and taking off. He dumped the body in a ditch along a dirt road not far from their home in Park City. By September of 1986, Vicky Wegerle, 28 at the time and a mother of 2, had caught Rader's eye. He would walk by her house during the day and listen to her play the piano. He had thought this murder out carefully, calling it his PJ project. By 10 a.m. on September 16, Rader dressed up as a telephone repairman and knocked on Wegerle's door. She let him into her home, thinking that he was going to fix the telephone line. He cut the line and told her that he was going to tie her up. At gunpoint, he forced her into the bedroom and tried to tie her, but she gave him a fight, causing cuts and scratches on Rader. He got a rope and stopped her fighting by choking her to death. After that, he took photos of the body in different positions, then left, stealing Wegerle's car. Soon after that, Bill Wegerle, the husband, said that he saw his own car going in the opposite direction of the house but could not identify the driver. When he arrived home, he saw his 2-year-old son by himself in the living room. He searched the house for his wife and soon found her on the floor behind the bed in their bedroom. Vicky was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead after a few hours. As this was happening, Rader was disposing of the evidence and parked the wagonless car just a few blocks away from the home. He went to his own home, changed his clothes, and once away got away with murder. In 1991, Rader found an older woman who was 62 and lived on her own, Dolores Davis. Davis lived a mile and a half away from Rader, where he noticed her at her home. He had a very well thought out plan to get what would be his last victim. He was going to camping with the Boy Scouts over the weekend. On January 19, 1991, he came up with an excuse to slip away from one of the scout meetings. He drove his car to his parents' house to change out of his scout uniform and into his hid clothes. He then drove to the Baptist church in the Park City to park his car and finish his plan out on foot. Once he got to the Davis house, he waited outside until he saw that she was asleep. He broke the glass door at the back of the house with a cement block that he found. Dolores came out of her bedroom and found Rader. He used the same line as he had almost every time, saying that he needed money, a car, food, and that he was going to tie her up. He tied her up in the bedroom and strangled her to the death. Rader took the body outside and put her in the trunk of her own car. He drove to a lake near Park City and hid the body and evidence under some tree. He drove the car back to the Davis house, wiped it down for fingerprints, and then left to go back to the church. He went back to where he hid the body, put it in his trunk, and dumped the body under a bridge in Sedgwick County. Rader then went somewhere to change back to his scout uniform and returned back to the camp. The following evening, he went back to where he left the body and took photographs of it. From 1991 to 2004, BTK stayed in hiding. No one heard from him for over 10 years. But on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murder, the Wichita Eagle newspaper ran an article about the crime and BTK. A book by Robert Beatty came out about the nightmare that haunted Wichita, Kansas, that is BTK. This book and article angered Rader because he thought they were trying to tell his own story. On 17th March 2004, Rader mailed a letter to the Wichita Eagle from an undercover named Bill Thomas Killman. The envelope had 3 photocopy pictures of the ones he took of Vicky Fagerle and her driver license, then signed it with the same signature that had been used in the previous letters. The letter was sent to the FBI and the investigation on BTK started again, hitting the media and internet. Rader sent another letter on May 5, 2004 to a.k.a. TV. It was a word puzzle that contained a deeper meaning with letters and numbers. Next, on June 9, 2004, he left a package taped to a sign in the middle of the city which had a gruesome description of the Otero murders and a sketch of a dead body hanging by a rope. He titled the sketch, "The Sexual Thrill is My Bill." On June 17, 2004, there was another package labeled BTK that was found at the Wichita Public Library. In this letter, Rader explained that the time was running out for him and he wanted to wait for the right time for his next hit. The fifth item dropped by Rader was on October 22, 2004, when it was found by an UPS officer. There was a collage of children with bindings across their bodies and faces inside the manila envelope. It also contained an autobiography that listed false details about BTK. For example, the year he was born and the area that he lived in, to mislead the police officers. Just 8 days after Rader became the president of the church council at the Christ Lutheran Church, there was a special K box with markings BTK and bomb in the back of a pickup truck. Inside the box was information on his projects that he had watched or stalked, along with even more misleading information. Also inside the box was information on his projects that he had watched or stalked, along with even more misleading information. Also inside the box was a question asking if there was a floppy disk made, if it would be able to be tracked back to the computer that he used to make it. Later, the police replied that no, which was a lie. The next clue found was another cereal box discovered on January 25, 2005. after he sent directions to a.k.a. TV on where to find the box. Inside the box was a doll with rope around its neck and tied to a pipe, simulating the murder of Josephine Otero. The 10th drop was a postcard that arrived on February 3, 2005, that was sent to a.k.a. saying that he was going to send a floppy disk. So, when the 11th was found 13 days later at the audio of KSAS TV, the police analyzed the floppy disk, which was drawn back to Christ Lutheran Church under the name of Dennis. They looked up the church and found the name of the president, Dennis Rader. They drove past his home one day in an undercover vehicle and saw a familiar car from past security cameras. It was Rader's black Jeep Cherokee. The police asked his daughter Carrie for a DNA sample, saying that it was for a medical record. But in reality, the police were using it to match to the semen found in past crime scenes left by BTK. The Wichita Police Department found a match and finally solved the case after 30 years. On February 25, 2005, the Wichita Police Department surrounded Rader's car after he ate lunch at work and led him to a waiting police car where he was handcuffed. That same day, Rader was arrested. He was then taken to an interrogation room where at first he did not talk, but soon opened up and gave every little detail possible. By the end, Rader had given 30-hour confession. In his confession, he talked highly about his crimes, and it was evident that he was proud of what he had done and that he liked the publicity that he had been given. The next day, Rader took his first mugshot and realized that the police were not on his side. On March 1, the public was finally able to see a live video of BTK receiving the charges against him before he was found guilty. The court had a lot of evidence against Rader after they searched his home. They found his mother load, which contained the original BTK letters, victims' driver licenses, photos that were taken, cutouts from newspaper articles, and artwork that was found in a cabinet in his home office. Dennis Rader's court case started on July 27, 2005. For all 10 victims, Rader confessed with much detail and no remorse, pleading guilty. Family members from each victim were able to speak, telling Rader the hatred they have for him and how they will never be able to see their loved ones once again. After that, Rader was able to give a statement where he talked for 20 to 30 minutes on what was supposed to be an apology, but he mainly talked about himself. It was very obvious to the court and the millions of viewers that he was not truly sorry for his actions and that he liked the attention that he was getting. On August 18, 2005, Judge Weller sentenced Dennis Rader to life in prison. Rader would not be eligible for parole until 2180. He was also not allowed access to materials that would fulfill his fantasies. On August 19, 2005, Rader was taken to his new home, the El Dorado Correctional Facility in El Dorado, Kansas.